I'm Matt Downing, and welcome to Diving Deep EDU.
Curious conversations with all types of peeps. Encouraging innovation, we are diving deep. Certainly education is what we like to speak. Fervent with dedication, now it is time to teach. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. We are doing a mini quick hitting series on hybrid learning. It's a hot topic these days and something many people are reflecting upon and gearing up for in the next school year. Our guest today is Rachelle Dene Poth. Rachelle was a former guest on Diving Deep EDU, so go back, check out episode number 3, listen to our conversation. Rachelle is a Spanish teacher, STEAM teacher, as well as an attorney. She's a frequent blogger, presenter, podcaster, and author. Rachelle's the president of the ISTE Teacher Education Network and recently received the ISTE Making It Happen Award. Rachelle, thank you so much for joining me. ¿Cómo está?
Look at you go. Yeah, it's great to be back and talk with you today. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Estoy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?
Bien. So as we think about hybrid learning, as we reflect, what are some of your big takeaways?
Well, it has definitely been an interesting year. Like I was just having a conversation with somebody earlier about, whenever you're teaching, I mean, for me, I've been teaching Spanish and STEAM for at least the last 7 years. I haven't always taught STEAM, but there are certain topics or things that I cover every year. And you kind of know when you're at that point in the year because it's like that focus of what you're learning. And that's like, sometimes it just hits me where I think, wow, this year has gone by so fast. And I was thinking the same thing because graduations and things happening. I think, oh my, where did this past year go? But I think about how many different things happened during that time. And when it comes to hybrid, or however we've been teaching this past year, there are definitely challenges that came with it. And I had written a couple blogs and did my own little podcast, just kind of thinking through some of them. And of course, there's a lot of negatives, right? A lot of frustrations that we experience. But looking back on it, I feel like there was just so much out there for us to kind of embrace and learn and take risks with it. And I think, I've seen, and I know my own experience, like that we have all learned a lot this year. And I think teachers, in some cases, for the first time, may have started to use technology or took some risks that before they were like, yeah, I'm not going to take any of these risks because at that point, a year ago, whenever schools closed, what do we have to lose? Because we didn't have anything to draw experience from. And so when I think back to this past year, when it first started, we were fully virtual, and then we transitioned for 18 weeks to hybrid. And then this last 9 weeks, we were either students chose to be full 5 days in person or stay virtual. And every single time there was an adjustment to be made. But I felt like it helped me, I know at least, think about what I was actually doing in my classroom. What ways was I creating for my students to connect with each other and to build skills beyond the Spanish, of course. But I just feel like it was a really great opportunity for teachers to try new ideas, to make connections, and to create a space for students to, explore a lot of things that maybe they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. The trying, the taking a risk, the being willing to do something different. And I think a lot of people could agree with you with that, with hybrid learning. What are some ways that you did see people take risks? Maybe for yourself, or maybe for a colleague, or maybe for someone in a different school. What were some ways that you saw people actually jumping out, taking a risk, doing something different, trying something out that they've never tried before?
Yeah, well, I just know for my own classroom, some of the different tools that I would use that I've used for years. And I knew that some other teachers were trying things, like a Nearpod and putting all of their materials into something and just really taking on something that before maybe they were like, yeah, I don't know, what does it do? But realizing that there were so many possibilities with it. And even not even based on technology, but looking at things like project-based learning, Genius Hour, those types of things that I think well, I know I recommended last year too, thinking about, okay, what happens if we have to go back and forth between these
Yeah.
different learning environments?
Yeah.
Technology will fail, of course, we know. So, what are some strategies that we can use that if we find out, you know what, we can't be in school for 2 weeks or however long, that we can put something into place that gives students opportunities to be independent in learning? And so, I know a lot of educators started to embrace new ideas like the project based learning or
Mm.
Genius Hour, even trying things like choice boards,
Yeah.
different technology tools, or even maybe for the first time, like narrowing down the types of tools they were using and realizing, like, oh, I've been using this digital tool for this purpose, but I didn't know that I could use it for all of these other things,
Mm.
and kind of, expanding. Um, so I don't know. There's a lot of a lot of possibilities. I know that I tried a lot of different tools, and I definitely made a lot of mistakes with some of the things I was doing and struggled, and I'm terrible at
Mm.
juggling sometimes, but it was, I'm happy with how things went. Could they have gone better? Of course, but
Yeah.
it's something to build on and grow on for this upcoming year.
Yeah, let's stay on the risk for a moment because another part that I've realized and I've sort of observed and have experienced myself is the process of taking a risk, the process of trying something new. So there's something powerful, obviously, in a genius hour, right? Doing that in your classroom. I know you're a big proponent of that and doing some different projects like that, some different project based learning. But there's also something wonderful that happens in that process for the teacher in taking a risk and trying something new and trying to juggle something and see if it works. And I want to get your insight on that. Why do you think it is so important or so helpful for a teacher to take a risk? Why is that so helpful actually for the teacher through that process?
That is a great question, because the taking of a risk is something, when I first started teaching, I really didn't. I might have said, like, oh, yeah, I tried different ideas or take some
Mm,
risks, but I really didn't. And for me, my experience actually that kind of pushed me into this direction was when I went to law school. I'd already been teaching for
yeah.
5 years, and I enrolled in law school, and I was teaching full time and going to school. And it put me back. I mean, that was a big risk to do that, first of all. And then it put me back into the classroom, and I was out of my comfort zone, and I was uncomfortable for sure. I didn't always know the answers, and it helped me. It definitely re-engaged me in teaching, but it gave me that different perspective of what it's like to kind of put yourself out there. And then from after that experience moving forward, I realized, like, yeah, we need to take the risks, and it can definitely be scary, but
Mm,
we want our students to be comfortable when they come up against challenges, and
mm.
all of that productive struggle and all of those
Yeah.
things that help them to build these essential skills for the
Yeah.
future, and know that, like, yeah, okay, I got F's in geometry, all right, I didn't do that well, but what's the lesson I learned? Or I tried to do this, and yeah, I wasn't very good at it, and doing that in front of them, because I've done that a lot of times, and I say, yeah, I'm going to try this with us today. We'll see how it goes. And sometimes after 5 minutes and I see, like, it's just not working, or they say to me, what is this supposed to be? And I say, yep, you know what? We're going to scrap that. I knew it may or may not work, but when they see us doing that, and then our response to it and how we work through it, it's a good model to set for them, so they become more comfortable and build their own confidence. And it's just a good example for our students, like embracing failure. Okay, what did we learn from it? Because there's learning in failure, of
Yeah.
course. So now what do we do, and where do we go from here?
I really like the phrasing that you use, the productive struggle or the productive challenge, like working through that. And that is very productive. And we can't get to the end or the fruit of that labor if we don't have that struggle or that interaction. That is so necessary. And talking about that struggle, talking about the challenge, what are some challenges that you've seen that have sort of come to the surface for you as some of the biggest challenges for this hybrid or virtual or remote teaching?
Oh my goodness. When I think back to whenever it first started, I didn't know how to balance everything,
Mm.
because you feel like, in virtual, for me at the start of the year, I, I got used to it. It was a transition, of course, but at least I felt like I had all the students there. Now, whether or not they were all listening at the same time, because they're in their own space, or their cameras weren't on, but I still felt like whatever message that I was conveying to them or whatever I was sharing, that they were all connected in that same space. But then shifting to the hybrid, where
Mm.
some of them are at home and the students are in the
Yeah.
class, you feel pulled in those different directions. And it's like, how do I divide my time?
Yeah.
Because no matter what you do, you're missing out on those opportunities and interactions and the support that you need to give for somebody else. And so trying to figure out, like, how do I balance this?
Mm.
And that was a big struggle for me. And of course, the technology with the multiple computers and the
Yeah.
external microphone and all of that to help students feel as connected in the class as they could be, even though we were so disconnected based on our locations.
Yeah, the balance seems to be a big issue talking with teachers. Bring us into some ways that you've dealt with that as you've processed and tried to have some productive struggle with the balance.
Yeah, it took. I mean, when I first started, I thought back to when schools first closed last year, and I thought, okay, now that I know what I did then, what am I going to do differently now? And it was
Mm.
exhausting. I mean, there
Yeah.
are so many things we have to balance because, of course, technology being the biggest problem, because you don't know if the students have the devices, if it's reliable, if you're at school, if your technology is going to work,
Mhm.
and then trying to figure out where to spend the time. Like, how do I prepare for this? So, do I teach the whole time, or how do I know the students are actually listening? Are they leaving? What tools can I use to kind of put them in
Yeah.
together? And so, like for me, my best tips were that I brought in extra equipment. So I had a computer, but it didn't have an internal webcam or the microphone. So I had to have those. And then I had the second computer, and the biggest thing was, at first, I just used my headset. So the problem with that was that the students in the classroom couldn't hear the students at home, and
Right.
then I couldn't interact. And so once
Right.
I got the microphone, and then they could actually have conversations with each other, it was like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then
Mm.
I started to feel like I was in a little bit more of a flow because I started classes in a certain way, or I had students as they were, of course, there's problems joining in. I had some activity for them to start with to do like a check in, because that was
Yeah.
important too. I wanted to know how they were feeling. I definitely wanted their feedback. And then I tried to kind of rotate that. So check in with the students as they came into the classroom, and then use breakout rooms in some cases, and then the students could work together in the breakout rooms virtually, and I could have the students in the classroom work
It's
together.
great.
But then having some different tools, a handful of tools that enable you to do a lot, like those interactive lessons, the video tools that you can use. The game-based learning, of course, are always a hit, but at least it helps students to
Mhm.
feel like they're connected.
True.
Or even those whiteboard spaces, having
Mhm.
students collaborate where they may not be in the same physical space, but they're posting on the same space. So it's kind of a connection for them. And so it definitely was a work in progress, but there's no perfect solution, of
Yep.
course. So all we need to do is just like be open to ideas, take some risks, definitely be flexible, and
Mm.
look back on it now, especially, anytime you have to reflect, and then think about, okay, what's something I could do a little bit differently?
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for highlighting the need to connect these different classrooms, the in person, the ones at home, and the ways that you thought about that to sort of bring connections for them, whether it be speaking or different games or different whiteboard features, but continually to iterate and change and try to bring these different groups together. So you're always changing, you're growing, and let's look forward, right? I'm not sure what's going to be happening in your school district, but across the country, many districts are still going to be hybrid come the fall. What is something that you would envision or hope for as we look forward with hybrid learning?
I said this a couple of months ago too, and it was kind of, I mean, with all things that there should be pushback, right? Because you want to consider all of the different viewpoints and experiences.
Hmm.
But the one thing that I appreciated, and I know that students definitely did too, was like when we were hybrid, we had Wednesdays that were asynchronous days.
Okay.
And I really liked having the asynchronous part because there were so many things that we could do on those days. And I was just thinking, like, in the future, it would be nice. And I know it's hard, like elementary students, you want them in school, they need to be in the classrooms with their teachers. But I was thinking more at, like, say, the high school level, where I've had students who say, I want to do a career job shadow or something, but I
Hmm.
can't miss my double, whatever the class is. Or I would like to go and tour a college, but I don't want to miss because I'll fall behind in this class. And I thought,
Hmm.
if we could keep an asynchronous day, whether it's once a month or, once per 9 weeks or something, where that's a day where if students want to do a college visit, they want to do some job, career, study, parents could meet with teachers could meet one-on-one with students, community, place-based learning, project-based learning, all of these possibilities. I just thought that there was something to be said for that. But the asynchronous piece, it was a lot of work because you have to have things for students to work on and lessons. Yeah. But I started to think about what could be done in that time where they're not working at the same time. And if there's other opportunities where students and teachers too could connect together, because finding that time is so hard. And I know it wouldn't work for all grade levels, but it was just something that I considered. But for everybody, just hopefully keeping something in place where students and families can connect and communicate and have the access to all the resources and support that they need, whatever works for you in your classroom, in your school. I think that's important to have, a few tools in place so as to not overwhelm either, because that is definitely a consideration that we need to keep in our mind.
Yeah, without a doubt. Rachelle, you've been bringing us so much insight and helpful wisdom. Close us out with some tips or a final thought in regards to hybrid learning.
Well, I would say first, think about, this is what I always recommend actually, think about something that has typically taken a lot of time, whether it's come down to like the planning or your assessment or something that for me years ago, it was like a disconnect. I felt like I really couldn't connect with my students and I wasn't there. I wasn't available for them when they had questions or needed the resources. So focus on one thing and start with that. And maybe it's, having a space for students to collaborate with their classmates, to maybe collaborate on a global scale, or think about something again, like that takes a lot of your time and kind of expand on it. So let's say you have students complete like a quick check-in, like an entrance or an exit ticket, or maybe you have students who are absent from class and they miss the content. So what is something that you can use and create that can be used later on and students can access it? And I would say start with some of those ideas. Just explore one at a time. Like you don't have to do all the things. You just got to pick one. And if it doesn't work, there are many more out there.
Rachelle, thank you so much for joining me again on Diving Deep EDU. This was a fast-paced and helpful conversation. Thank you so much for all of your insights. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, go back, listen to episode number 3, and you can hear our previous conversation. If you like this episode, subscribe, share it out, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. All of those things will help get this podcast out to more people. Until next time.
Wow, it's time to reflect. That's astounding. You've been checking out the podcast from Matthew Downing. Hope you like diving deep like a scuba diver. And the show provoked hope, that's our true desire.